The judge ordered her dragged out of the courtroom. What he didn't know? Every inch of that courtroom sits on land her family owns. Remove this woman from my courtroom, now. The gavel cracked against wood like a gunshot. Every head in the room turned toward the woman standing alone at the defendant's table, her white blouse stark against the mahogany paneling, her hands perfectly still at her sides. She did not move. The judge's face flushed crimson above his black robes. 30 years on the bench, and no one had ever stood silent when he gave an order. No one had ever looked at him the way this woman was looking now, not with fear, not with anger, but with something far more unsettling. Patience. The deputy at the door was already moving, boots heavy on the marble floor, hand reaching for the cuffs on his belt. 6 feet 2 inches of county authority bearing down on a woman who weighed maybe 130 pounds. She still did not move. What no one in that courtroom knew, not the judge gripping his gavel like a weapon, not the deputy closing the distance with practiced intimidation, not the clerk smirking behind her computer screen, was that the ground beneath their feet belonged to her family. Every square inch of it. For 132 years. The deputy's hand closed around her arm. His grip was too tight, deliberate, the kind of pressure designed to leave bruises that wouldn't show. "Ma'am, you need to come with me." She finally spoke. Her voice was calm, measured, carrying easily in the sudden silence. "I'll walk, but you will want to remove your hand." The deputy laughed, short, sharp, dismissive. He had no idea who he was touching. None of them did. And in exactly 17 days, every person in this room would learn exactly how catastrophic that ignorance would be. The courthouse doors swung open, letting in a blade of afternoon sunlight. Nadine Ashford stepped through them without looking back. If this satisfies you, hit subscribe, because what happens next will turn everything upside down. 72 hours earlier, the morning had started like any other. Nadine stood at her kitchen counter at 5:47 a.m., coffee steaming in a white ceramic mug, sorting through a stack of manila folders with the methodical precision of someone who had spent 15 years turning chaos into order. Each folder aligned with the edge of the counter, each document inside arranged chronologically, oldest at the back, newest at the front. No dog-eared corners, no coffee stains, no room for error. The apartment was small but immaculate. 1 bedroom, 1 bath, a living room that doubled as her home office. Nothing on the walls except a single framed photograph, a black and white image of a man in his 60s, standing in front of a wooden fence, his hand resting on a post like he owned everything the camera could see. Her great-great-grandfather, Isaiah Ashford, born into slavery in 1842, died a landowner in 1921. The photograph had hung in her grandmother's house, then her mother's, now hers. A reminder, a promise, a wait. Nadine checked her watch. 5:51. 9 minutes until she needed to leave for the office. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her emails. 3 new messages from clients. 2 from her assistant. 1 from her lawyer, marked urgent. The lawyer's email was brief. Boundary dispute hearing scheduled for Thursday. You'll need to file the initial paperwork in person. Clerk's office opens at 8 a.m. Don't be late. Thursday, 2 days from now. A simple property dispute with a neighbor who had built his fence 3 feet onto her family's land. Civil matter. Straightforward. The kind of case that should take 15 minutes to file and 6 weeks to resolve. Should. Nadine had learned long ago that nothing involving her family's property was ever simple. She finished her coffee, rinsed the mug, placed it in the drying rack at precisely the angle that allowed maximum airflow. Then she picked up her briefcase, leather, worn at the corners, inherited from her mother, and walked out the door. The drive to Bellamy and Associates took 23 minutes. Same route every day, same parking spot in the garage, 3rd level, northeast corner, close to the stairwell. Same nod to the security guard who never remembered her name, despite seeing her 5 days a week for 3 years. The elevator deposited her on the 7th floor at 6:32 a.m. First one in, as usual. The office wouldn't fill up for another hour, but Nadine preferred the quiet. Fewer interruptions, fewer questions, fewer colleagues asking if she was sure about her analysis, if she had double-checked her numbers, if she wouldn't mind having someone take a second look at her work. She had a master's degree in finance, 12 years of experience in commercial real estate appraisal, a flawless track record that had saved this firm millions in bad investments. None of it mattered when she walked into a room. What mattered was the color of her skin. Nadine settled into her desk, opened her laptop, and began reviewing the Henderson portfolio. Shopping center in the suburbs. Anchor tenant threatening to leave. The owner wanted to know the property's value if they lost the anchor versus if they kept it. 2 scenarios, 12 variables, 47 pages of analysis. She had finished the report at 2 a.m. It was thorough, precise, defensible in court if necessary. It would be questioned anyway. It always was. At 8:15, Marcus Whitmore walked past her desk. Senior associate, 3 years less experience than Nadine. Corner office with a window. He paused, looked at the stack of folders on her desk, then at her. Ashford, that the Henderson file? She didn't look up. It is. You sure you've got the retail comps right? Those can be tricky. Her fingers stopped moving on the keyboard. She counted to 3 in her head. Then she reached into her desk drawer, pulled out a bound document, and held it up without turning around. 47 pages, 12 comparable properties, 3 valuation methodologies, sensitivity analysis on pages 31 through 38. Whitmore took the document, flipped through it. His expression shifted from condescension to something that might have been surprise or might have been annoyance. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. Right, well, good work, I guess. He walked away without another word. Nadine turned back to her computer. Her jaw was tight. Her hands were steady. She had learned long ago not to let them see what their doubt did to her. Chowtuk. That evening, Nadine sat alone in her apartment, a wooden box open on the coffee table in front of her. The box was old, walnut, hand-carved, the brass hinges tarnished with age. It had belonged to her grandmother, and her grandmother's mother before that, passed down through 4 generations of Ashford women who understood that some things were too important to trust to banks or lawyers or anyone outside the family. Inside the box, documents. Yellowed paper, brittle at the edges, covered in faded ink. Some typed, some handwritten, some bearing official seals that had crumbled into dust decades ago. Nadine lifted the first document carefully, handling it the way an archaeologist might handle an ancient scroll. The paper was soft, almost fabric-like, worn thin by time and touch. Bill of sale. March 17, 1871, recorded in Mercer County, Florida. The buyer, Isaiah Ashford. The seller, First National Bank of Jacksonville, acting as receiver for the estate of William Cornelius Hartwell. The property, 17 acres of land in the town of Belmont, bounded on the north by Main Street, on the east by Court Avenue, on the south by Pine Road, on the west by the Suwannee River. The price? $412. Cash. Nadine ran her finger along the edge of the paper. $412. Everything her great-great-grandfather had saved in the 6 years since emancipation. Every penny earned from backbreaking labor, from cutting timber and hauling cotton and doing the work that white men wouldn't do, and black men had no choice but to accept. He had bought this land with blood and sweat and faith. Faith that owning something, having his name on a deed, recorded in a courthouse, recognized by law, would mean something. Would protect him. Would protect his children and their children and every generation that came after. She pulled out the next document. Ground lease agreement. March 14, 1892. This one she knew by heart. 21 years after Isaiah bought the land, Mercer County had come to him with a proposition. They wanted to build a courthouse. The old one had burned down. They needed a site. Isaiah's 17 acres included the only suitable location in town. He could have sold it. The county offered 3 times what he had paid, enough money to set his family up for generations. He refused. Instead, he offered them a lease, 99 years, renewable. The county could build their courthouse, hold their trials, dispense their justice. But the land would remain Ashford land. The deed would stay in Ashford hands. The county commissioners had laughed at first. A black man dictating terms to white officials? Unthinkable. But Isaiah had something they needed, and he knew how to wait. They signed the lease in March of 1892. The courthouse was completed in 1895. And for 130 years, every judge who sat on that bench, every lawyer who argued in that courtroom, every defendant who stood trial for their freedom, all of them had stood on Ashford ground. Most of them never knew. Nadine placed the documents back in the box, closed the lid, ran her fingers over the carved surface. Thursday, 2 days. A simple filing. That's all she wanted. The boundary dispute was real. Her neighbor, a man named Henderson, no relation to the portfolio client, had built a fence that encroached on a small parcel her family owned on the outskirts of town. 2.3 acres of land that had been Ashford property since 1923, when her great-grandmother expanded the family holdings after Isaiah's death. It wasn't about the money. 2.3 acres wasn't worth much on its own, but Nadine had learned from her grandmother, who had learned from hers. You never give up land, not an inch, not a foot, not a blade of grass, because once you start giving things up, you never stop. She checked her watch. 8:47 p.m. Time to prepare the filing documents. The papers were already in order, of course. She had checked them twice, but she checked them again anyway, spreading them across her dining table, making sure every form was complete, every signature in place, every copy properly notarized. The complaint, the property survey, the deed from 1923, along with the chain of title showing every transfer from then to now, photographs of the encroaching fence, a letter from her attorney outlining the demand, everything by the book, everything legal, everything exactly as it should be. She gathered the papers, squared them against the table edge, and slid them into her briefcase. Thursday. The clerk's office. 8 a.m. Simple. Thursday arrived under a gray sky, clouds thick enough to turn the morning light flat and colorless. Nadine dressed with care. White blouse, charcoal slacks, black flats with rubber soles. No jewelry except a simple watch. No designer labels, no expensive accessories. Nothing that could be interpreted as showing off or trying too hard. She had learned the dress code for black women navigating white institutions, professional enough to be taken seriously, modest enough not to threaten. The Mercer County Courthouse sat at the corner of Main Street and Court Avenue, exactly where Isaiah Ashford's land deed said it would be. A Greek Revival building, white columns, bronze doors gone green with age. The kind of architecture designed to inspire awe and submission in equal measure. Nadine had walked past this building hundreds of times. She had never once felt like she belonged inside it. She climbed the steps at 7:53 a.m., joining a small line of people waiting for the doors to open. A woman with a crying toddler. An elderly man leaning on a cane. 2 men in suits, lawyers probably, checking their phones and ignoring everyone around them. Nadine was the only black person in line. At 8 a.m. exactly, a security guard unlocked the doors. The line shuffled forward, funneling through a metal detector and an X-ray machine for bags. She placed her briefcase on the conveyor belt and stepped through the detector. No beep, no problem. "Ma'am, step aside, please." The voice came from her left, a deputy in a brown uniform, hand raised, blocking her path. His nameplate read, Nolan. His expression read trouble. "Is there a problem?" "Just a random check. Step aside." There was nothing random about it. Nadine had watched 3 people pass through ahead of her without being stopped. All of them white. But she stepped aside. Arguing would only make things worse. Deputy Nolan gestured to a female officer who approached with a handheld wand. Arms out, please. Nadine raised her arms. The wand swept over her body. No beep, no alarm. Nothing. Your bag. Open it. She unzipped her briefcase on a metal table. The female officer pawed through the contents. Legal documents, pens, her phone, a small notebook, a granola bar she had packed for lunch. What's the purpose of your visit today? Nadine kept her voice even. Filing a civil complaint. Clerk's office. What kind of complaint? Property dispute. Deputy Nolan leaned closer, looking at the documents spread across the table. His eyes lingered on the property deed. You own property in Mercer County? It was the way he said it, the slight lift of disbelief, the implication underneath. I do. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he stepped back, gestured toward the interior of the building. Have a nice day, ma'am. Nadine repacked her briefcase with steady hands. She did not hurry. She did not thank him. She walked through the lobby with her head high, feeling his eyes on her back the entire way. The clerk's office was on the second floor, room 204. A long counter separated the public area from the staff workspace behind it. 4 stations, 4 clerks, 2 with customers, 2 empty. Nadine took a number from the dispenser. 47. The display showed 39. She found a seat in the plastic chairs lining the wall and settled in to wait. At 8:22, her number was called. She approached the counter. The clerk behind it was a white woman in her 50s, silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, reading glasses perched on her nose. Her nameplate read, Priscilla Davenport. She did not look up as Nadine approached. Number 47? That's me? Still no eye contact. Priscilla's fingers clacked across her keyboard. Nature of your filing? Civil complaint. Boundary dispute. Nadine placed her briefcase on the counter, opened it, and withdrew the stack of documents. I have the complaint form, property survey, deed, and supporting documentation. Priscilla finally looked up. Her gaze traveled from the documents to Nadine's face, then back again. Something shifted in her expression. Not hostility, exactly. More like a recalibration. Let me see. She took the papers, flipped through them slowly. Too slowly. Reading every line as if checking for errors, or looking for a reason to reject them. This deed. It's quite old. The property has been in my family since 1923. And you're the current owner? I am. Priscilla turned to her computer, typed something, waited, typed again. Her frown deepened. There seems to be a discrepancy. Nadine's stomach tightened, but her face remained neutral. What kind of discrepancy? The system shows this parcel as having an unresolved lien. I can't process a new filing until that's cleared. There is no lien. I had the title searched last month. It came back clean. She pulled another document from her briefcase, the title search report, dated 3 weeks ago, showing no encumbrances on the property. Priscilla barely glanced at it. Our records show something different. You'll need to clear it up with the county recorder's office before I can accept this filing. The recorder's office is in this building? 3rd floor, room 312, but they're backed up right now. Probably take a few weeks to get an appointment. A few weeks. Enough time for the encroaching fence to become permanent. Enough time for her neighbor to claim adverse possession had begun. I'd like to speak with a supervisor. Priscilla's smile was thin and cold. I am the supervisor, and I'm telling you, Ms. She glanced at the documents. Ashford, your filing cannot be processed today. Come back when your title is clear. She pushed the papers across the counter. Nadine did not pick them up. I'm aware of Florida Rule of Civil Procedure 1.110. A complaint may be filed regardless of title issues, which can be addressed during proceedings. The clerk's office cannot reject a filing based on disputed encumbrances. Priscilla's smile froze. I beg your pardon? The rule is clear. You can note the discrepancy in the record, but you cannot refuse to accept the filing. If you do, I have the right to request a written explanation of the denial, which I can then appeal to the chief judge. For a long moment, neither woman moved. Then Priscilla leaned back in her chair. "Wait here." She stood, gathered Nadine's documents, and disappeared through a door behind the counter. Nadine waited. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Behind her, the line grew longer. Other people were called to other windows. Time passed. At 9:03, Priscilla returned. She was not alone. The man with her was tall, broad-shouldered, gray at the temples. His suit was expensive. His smile was practiced. The nameplate on his lapel read, "Boyd Trumbull, Court Administrator." "Ms. Ashford, I understand we have a situation. Wait until you see what happens next. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it." Boyd Trumbull's office was on the 3rd floor. Wood paneling, leather chairs, a view of the courthouse lawn through tall windows. The kind of space designed to impress visitors and intimidate complainants. Nadine sat in one of the leather chairs, her briefcase on her lap. Trumbull sat behind his desk, her documents spread out in front of him. "I apologize for any confusion, Ms. Ashford. Our clerks are trained to be thorough, and sometimes that can create friction." His voice was smooth, reasonable, the verbal equivalent of a handshake that lasted slightly too long. "The confusion is that your clerk tried to refuse a legitimate filing based on a lien that doesn't exist." Trumbull nodded, still smiling. "Yes, about that. I've looked into the matter, and it appears there was a data entry error several years ago. Someone input information into the wrong parcel record. These things happen in large systems." "Then you can correct the error and process my filing." Of course. He shuffled through her papers. "However, correcting a county record requires a formal process. We'll need to verify the original source of the error, generate a correction request, have it reviewed by the recorder's office, and then update the system. Standard procedure. Should take 4 to 6 weeks. 4 to 6 weeks. The same time frame Priscilla had quoted. Coordinated, rehearsed. "Mr. Trumbull, I'm filing a boundary dispute complaint. The alleged lien, which again does not exist, is irrelevant to that filing. Florida Rule of Civil Procedure 1.110 is clear. The clerk's office cannot condition acceptance on title status." Trumbull's smile flickered. Just for a moment. "Ms. Ashford, I appreciate your knowledge of procedure, but county offices have discretion in how we implement state rules. We have to balance public access with administrative efficiency." "Administrative efficiency," Nadine repeated the words slowly, letting them hang in the air. "Is that what you call refusing to accept a filing from a black woman who knows her rights?" The temperature in the room dropped. Trumbull's smile vanished completely. "I'm going to pretend you didn't say that. And I'm going to pretend you didn't just admit you're selectively applying rules." Nadine stood. "I want my documents back. All of them. And I want a written explanation of why my filing was not processed today, signed by you, with a copy of the relevant rule you're citing as justification." "I don't think that's necessary. Florida Statute 119.07, Public Records. Any citizen has the right to request documentation of government actions affecting them. Refusal to provide such documentation is a violation of state law." The words landed like punches. Trumbull sat back in his chair, his face cycling through surprise, calculation, and something that looked like reassessment. "You're not just a property owner, are you, Ms. Ashford?" "I'm a citizen who knows the law. That's all you need to know." She held out her hand. After a long pause, Trumbull gathered her documents and placed them in her palm. "Come back in a week. The system error will be corrected by then." "A week. Best I can do." Nadine took her papers, placed them in her briefcase, walked to the door. She paused with her hand on the knob. "Mr. Trumbull, I keep very detailed records, dates, times, names, conversations." She looked back at him. "I've been doing it for a very long time, something you might want to remember." She walked out without waiting for a response. The week that followed was a masterclass in bureaucratic obstruction. On Friday, Nadine called the recorder's office to check on the supposed lien. She was transferred 4 times, put on hold for 47 minutes, and eventually told that they had no record of any pending correction request. On Monday, she drove back to the courthouse to file the request in person. The recorder's office was closed for staff training. No advance notice, no posted sign, just a locked door and a security guard who shrugged when she asked what was going on. On Tuesday, she tried again. This time, the office was open, but the clerk claimed they couldn't process her request without authorization from court administration. When Nadine asked for the form required for such authorization, she was told there wasn't one. It had to be requested verbally from Mr. Trumbull's office. She went to Trumbull's office. His assistant said he was in meetings all day. She waited 3 hours. He never emerged. On Wednesday, Nadine changed tactics. She submitted a formal public records request under Florida Statute 11907, asking for all documentation related to the alleged lien on her property. The county had 5 business days to respond. On Thursday, she received a letter. The county was extending the response period due to the voluminous nature of the records involved. New deadline, 30 days, every door closed, every path blocked, a system designed to wear down anyone who dared to challenge it. But Nadine had been fighting systems her entire life. She had grown up watching her grandmother navigate a world that wanted her to disappear, had learned that persistence was not just a virtue, but a survival skill, had built her career on the ability to find value where others saw only obstacles. They thought they were discouraging her. They were teaching her exactly where the weaknesses were. The following Monday, Nadine returned to the courthouse. This time, she didn't go to the clerk's office. She walked straight to the courtroom, room 4B, where civil matters were heard on Monday mornings. Her case wasn't on the docket, but Florida law allowed any citizen to observe court proceedings during normal business hours. She wanted to see how Judge Harlan Crestwood operated, wanted to understand the arena before she was forced to fight in it. The courtroom was half full, lawyers in suits, clients in their best clothes, a handful of observers in the gallery. Nadine took a seat in the back row, her briefcase at her feet, her notebook open on her lap. For 2 hours, she watched. Judge Crestwood was 64 years old, according to the plaque on his bench. White hair, florid face, the build of a man who had been athletic in his youth and comfortable in his middle age. He ran his courtroom with the casual authority of someone who had never been seriously challenged. His treatment of the lawyers was cordial, professional, the white lawyers anyway. There was only one black attorney in the room, a young woman handling a landlord-tenant dispute. Crestwood interrupted her 4 times during her opening statement, sustained every objection from opposing counsel without requiring explanation, cut her closing argument short with a wave of his hand. "I've heard enough. Ruling for the plaintiff. Next case." The young attorney stood frozen for a moment, her mouth open, the rest of her argument dying unspoken. Then she gathered her papers and walked out, her client trailing behind her, both of them wearing the expression of people who had just learned that the game was rigged. Nadine wrote in her notebook, "Crestwood, pattern, document." At 11:45, the morning docket cleared. The judge announced a lunch recess. People filed out of the courtroom. Nadine remained seated. A deputy approached. Not Nolan, a different one, younger, with an uncertain expression. "Ma'am, court's in recess. You need to exit the room." "I'll wait for the afternoon session." "The courtroom closes during recess. You can wait in the hallway or come back at 1:30. Reasonable. Fair. She stood, gathered her things, and walked toward the door. "Ms. Ashford?" The voice came from the bench. Judge Crestwood was still seated, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "I don't believe we've met." She stopped, turned. "No, Your Honor, we haven't." "You've been observing all morning. You're not on the docket. You're not an attorney I recognize." His eyes narrowed. "What's your interest in my courtroom?" There were a dozen safe answers. General interest, civic duty, research. Any of them would have satisfied the question and ended the conversation. Nadine chose truth. I'm a property owner in Mercer County. I'm trying to file a civil complaint. Your court administration has been making that difficult. Something flickered in Crestwood's expression. Difficult how? Phantom liens, lost paperwork, scheduling delays, the usual. The judge leaned back in his chair. The usual. You say that like it happens to you often. It happens to people like me all the time, Your Honor. I'm just the first one you've heard complain about it. Silence. Then Crestwood smiled. Not a friendly smile. The smile of a man who had just made a decision. I look forward to seeing your complaint, Ms. Ashford, when it eventually gets filed. He stood, walked through the door behind the bench. Gone. Nadine watched the door close. She had just made an enemy. She knew that, had probably made things harder for herself. But she had also learned something important. Judge Harlan Crestwood knew her name now, knew her face, knew she wasn't going to go away quietly. Good. Let him remember. 3 days later, the system finally broke. Or rather, Nadine broke it. She arrived at the courthouse at 7:45 a.m., 15 minutes before the doors opened. She was first in line. When the security checkpoint opened, she walked through without incident. Deputy Nolan wasn't on duty, replaced by an older man who barely glanced at her. She went straight to the clerk's office, took a number, waited. When her number was called, she approached the counter and found herself facing a different clerk. Young, male, black. His nameplate read, Jerome Carter. Good morning. How can I help you? For a moment, Nadine didn't speak. She had prepared for another battle with Priscilla Davenport, had armed herself with statutes and case citations and the cold fury of a woman who refused to be dismissed. This was unexpected. I'm filing a civil complaint. Boundary dispute. Jerome nodded, extended his hand for the documents. Let me take a look. He reviewed the papers carefully, checked the complaint form, examined the deed, the survey, the supporting documentation. His fingers moved efficiently, professionally, without the theatrical slowness that Priscilla had employed. Everything looks in order. He typed something into his computer. I'm not seeing any liens on this property. System must have been updated. Just like that. As if the phantom lien had never existed. As if 3 weeks of obstruction had been nothing but a minor clerical error. I can process this now. Filing fee is $312. Nadine handed over her credit card. Jerome ran it, stamped her documents, handed her a receipt. Your case number is 2024 CV0847. You'll receive a hearing date by mail within 2 weeks. Good luck, Ms. Ashford. She took the receipt, looked at Jerome's face. Thank you. He nodded. Next customer. Nadine walked out of the clerk's office with her case number and a feeling that should have been victory, but felt more like the calm before a storm. 3 weeks of obstruction. Then, sudden, inexplicable cooperation. Something had changed. Someone had decided that the direct approach wasn't working, that she needed to be handled differently. She had won this battle. But the war was just beginning. The hearing notice arrived 9 days later. Case 2024 CV0847. Ashford v. Henderson. Boundary dispute. Hearing date, Thursday, October 17th. Time, 3:30 p.m. Location, Mercer County Courthouse, Room 4B. Presiding Judge, Honorable Harlan Crestwood. Room 4B. Crestwood's courtroom. Of course. Nadine read the notice 3 times. Then she called her lawyer. It's not ideal, he admitted, but it's not illegal. Cases are assigned by rotation. Crestwood's on the civil docket this month. We can't request a different judge without cause. He confronted me in open court, told me he was looking forward to seeing my complaint. That's not cause. That's conversation. Unless he said something explicitly prejudicial, we don't have grounds for recusal. And if I file a motion anyway? It goes to Crestwood himself. He decides whether to recuse, and if he denies it, which he will, We've just antagonized the judge who's going to rule on your case." Nadine stared at the notice. "I'll represent myself at the hearing." Silence on the line. "Nadine, that's not wise." "I know, but I want him to see my face. I want to look him in the eye when he rules." Another pause. "It's your choice, but call me if things go sideways. I can file emergency motions if needed." "I will." She hung up. October 17th, 3 weeks away. Time to prepare. The morning of October 17th dawned bright and cold. Nadine dressed in the same outfit she had worn the first time she'd walked into the courthouse. White blouse, charcoal slacks, black flats. The same armor. The same careful calibration of professional and non-threatening. She arrived at the courthouse at 2:45 p.m., plenty of time before her 3:30 hearing. Deputy Nolan was back at the security checkpoint. He recognized her immediately. His eyes narrowed. His hand moved to his belt. "Ma'am, step aside for a random check." Same words, same tone, same performance. "I was randomly checked the last time I was here, Deputy, and the time before that, and the time before that." "Then you should be used to it by now." He wasn't even pretending anymore. Nadine stepped aside, arms out, wand sweep, bag search. Same routine, same violation, same reminder of her place in this building. When it was over, Nolan leaned close. "You here for the Crestwood hearing?" She didn't answer. "Word of advice, ma'am. Judge Crestwood doesn't like people who cause trouble, and you—" He smiled. "You seem like the type." He stepped back, gestured toward the interior. "Have a nice day." Nadine walked past him without a word. The courtroom was on the second floor, room 4B. The door was open. She walked in, and stopped. The room was full. Not just the normal traffic of a civil docket. This was something else. Lawyers, clerks, even a few people she recognized from the administrator's office. They had come to watch. Word had gotten around. The black woman who wouldn't take no for an answer. The property owner who cited statutes. The troublemaker who had looked Judge Crestwood in the eye and refused to back down. They wanted to see what happened next. Nadine walked to the defendant's table, set down her briefcase, took her seat. At the plaintiff's table, a white man in an expensive suit was already waiting. Malcolm Sheridan, her neighbor's attorney. She had researched him, 30 years of practice, specializing in property law, a reputation for aggressive tactics and favorable rulings. He turned as she sat down, looked at her, then at the empty chair beside her. "No attorney, Ms. Ashford?" "I'm representing myself." Sheridan's smile was the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "Bold choice." Before she could respond, the bailiff's voice cut through the room. "All rise. The Superior Court of Mercer County is now in session. The Honorable Harlan Crestwood presiding." Everyone stood. Judge Crestwood entered through the door behind the bench. His robes flowed around him like black wings. His eyes swept the courtroom, taking in the crowd, the cameras. Was someone recording this? And finally settling on Nadine. He sat down. Everyone else followed. Case number 2024, CV0847. Ashford versus Henderson. Boundary dispute. He looked at Sheridan. "Counsel for the plaintiff?" "Malcolm Sheridan, Your Honor. Appearing on behalf of Robert Henderson." "And for the defendant?" Crestwood's gaze moved to Nadine. "I see we have a pro se party." "Nadine Ashford, Your Honor. Representing myself." "So I've heard." He shuffled through papers on his bench. "Mr. Sheridan, you filed a motion to dismiss last week. Care to argue it?" Nadine stiffened. A motion to dismiss. She hadn't received any notification. She checked her phone. No emails, no letters, nothing. "Your Honor, I wasn't served with that motion." Crestwood didn't look at her. "The motion was filed with the clerk and mailed to your address of record. If you didn't receive it, that's not the court's problem. Mr. Sheridan?" Sheridan stood. "Thank you, Your Honor. You. The motion is straightforward. Ms. Ashford's complaint fails to state a cause of action upon which relief can be granted. The property survey she submitted is outdated, more than 3 years old, and therefore inadmissible under Evidence Code Section 90.702. Without a valid survey, she cannot establish the boundary she claims was encroached. The case should be dismissed. It was a lie. The survey was 18 months old, not 3 years, and Evidence Code 90.702 dealt with expert testimony, not documentary evidence. He was making up law, hoping she wouldn't catch it, hoping she was as ignorant as they assumed she must be. Your Honor, I object. Crestwood finally looked at her. Objection on what grounds? The survey in question is dated March of last year, 18 months ago. Evidence Code 90.702 pertains to expert witness qualification, not the admissibility of documents. Mr. Sheridan is misrepresenting both the facts and the law. She held up a copy of the survey. The date was clearly visible. Sheridan's face reddened. Your Honor, the plaintiff disputes the accuracy of that date. We believe the document has been altered. Altered? Nadine kept her voice level. This is a certified copy, stamped by the county surveyor's office. Is Mr. Sheridan accusing a county official of fraud? The room went silent. Crestwood's expression hardened. Ms. Ashford, you will address the court, not opposing counsel. My apologies, Your Honor. I'll rephrase. Is the plaintiff, through his counsel, making an accusation of document fraud against Mercer County? The question hung in the air. If Sheridan said yes, he'd be accusing the county. If he said no, his motion collapsed. Sheridan looked at the judge. The judge looked at Sheridan. Something passed between them, not spoken, but understood. Your Honor, Sheridan said slowly, the plaintiff withdraws the challenge to the survey date. We continue to argue that the complaint fails on other grounds. What other grounds? The deed Ms. Ashford submitted shows a chain of title that ends in 1987. There's no recorded transfer to her personally. This was a better argument. Partially true. Nadine's mother had died in 2019, and the property had passed to her through intestate succession. The formal transfer had been delayed while they sorted out estate matters. It wasn't recorded until 2021, but Nadine had anticipated this. Your Honor, the transfer to me was recorded with the county in 2021. I have a certified copy here. She held up the document. Crestwood glanced at it. His lip curled. Ms. Ashford, you seem to have an answer for everything. I have documentation for everything, Your Honor. That's different. The judge's face went red. I don't appreciate your tone. I apologize if I've given offense. I'm merely trying to present my case. Your case. Crestwood leaned forward. Your case is that you own property, your neighbor built a fence, and you want the court to make him move it. Is that about right? In summary, yes. And you're here without a lawyer, wasting this court's time with a dispute that should have been settled between neighbors. I attempted to settle it. My neighbor refused. Filing suit was my only option. Was it? The judge's voice dropped. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you came here looking for a fight, looking to make a point, looking to prove something. Nadine felt the shift in the room. The crowd was watching, recording, waiting. She chose her next words carefully. Your Honor, I came here to exercise my rights as a citizen. If that looks like fighting to you, I'd suggest the problem isn't with me. Silence. Absolute silence. Then Crestwood spoke. This hearing is concluded. The motion to dismiss is granted. Case dismissed. On what grounds? On the grounds that I find your complaint frivolous and your conduct in this courtroom disrespectful. He banged his gavel. Case dismissed. Ms. Ashford, you will vacate this courtroom immediately. Your Honor, I have the right to... You have the right to leave before I hold you in contempt. His voice rose. Deputy! Nolan appeared at the end of her row as if he'd been waiting. Remove this woman from my courtroom. Now! This was the moment she had walked into. The moment she had been preparing for. Nadine stood slowly. She gathered her papers. She placed them in her briefcase with deliberate care. And she looked directly at Judge Harlan Crestwood. "Your Honor, you just dismissed a case without allowing the defendant to present evidence, without allowing cross-examination, without even reading the motion you ruled on. That is a violation of due process under the 14th Amendment." She clicked her briefcase closed. "This courtroom sits on land that has been in my family for 132 years. My great-great-grandfather bought it. My grandmother maintained it. My mother protected it. And I will not be removed from it by a man who doesn't know the law he's sworn to uphold." The room erupted. Crestwood slammed his gavel. "Get her out of here!" Nolan grabbed her arm, hard, the grip that leaves bruises, the grip designed to hurt. "Ma'am, you're coming with me." She didn't resist, but she also didn't help. Made him work for it. Made him drag her across the courtroom floor in front of everyone watching. "I'll walk," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "But you will want to remove your hand." He didn't. He pulled her toward the door, his fingers digging into her flesh. And that was when she smiled. The smile of someone who knows something no one else knows. The smile of someone who has just set a trap and watched her enemies walk directly into it. Part 2 drops soon. Trust me, you're going to want to see what Nadine does next. Subscribe now. They put her in a holding room on the first floor. Not a cell, they didn't have grounds for arrest, but a small, windowless space with a metal table and 2 chairs bolted to the floor. Her briefcase sat on the table in front of her. They hadn't tried to take it, hadn't searched it, just dumped her here and left. Deputy Nolan stood outside the door. She could see his shadow through the frosted glass window. Nadine checked her watch. 4:17 p.m. 47 minutes since the hearing. 47 minutes since Crestwood had thrown out her case without cause. 47 minutes since she had mentioned the land. She hadn't meant to say it, had planned to keep that card hidden, to use it only when the time was right. But something had snapped. The accumulation of every slight, every dismissal, every moment when someone had looked at her and seen nothing worth respecting. It had all come pouring out. Now she had to deal with the consequences. The door opened. Boyd Trumbull walked in. He looked different than he had in his office 3 weeks ago, less confident, more worried, the kind of expression worn by someone who had just received very bad news. "Ms. Ashford." "Mr. Trumbull." He sat in the chair across from her, folded his hands on the table. "You've caused quite a scene. I defended myself in a courtroom that was actively denying me due process. If that's a scene, the fault lies with the court. The judge feels differently. The judge violated my constitutional rights. His feelings are irrelevant." Trumbull's jaw tightened. "You made a statement about the land." "I did." "Is it true?" Nadine reached into her briefcase, pulled out a folder, placed it on the table between them. "Ground lease agreement, March 14th, 1892. Signed by my great-great-grandfather, Isaiah Ashford, and the Mercer County Board of Commissioners. 99-year lease, renewed in 1991 by my grandmother, renewed again in 2015 by my mother, currently held by the Ashford Family Trust." She paused. "Of which I am the managing trustee." Trumbull stared at the folder. He didn't touch it. "You're saying you own the land under this courthouse?" "I'm saying my family does. We lease it to the county. The current term expires in 2040. That's..." He stopped, started again. "Why didn't you mention this before?" "Because it shouldn't matter. I came here to file a property dispute about a different parcel. 2.3 acres on the outskirts of town. Nothing to do with the courthouse. Nothing to do with any of you." She leaned forward. "I just wanted to be treated like any other citizen. That's all. File my paperwork, have my hearing, get a fair ruling based on the law." She tapped the folder. "Instead, I was profiled at security, turned away by your clerks, delayed by phantom liens, and then watched a judge dismiss my case without cause, in a courtroom that exists only because my family allowed it to be built." Trumbull was sweating now. She could see the sheen on his forehead. "Ms. Ashford, I'm sure there are explanations for—" "There are no explanations that matter. There are only facts. And the facts are that I have been discriminated against at every level of this county's court system." She stood. "I'm leaving now. Unless you're planning to arrest me?" He didn't answer. "I didn't think so." She gathered her briefcase, walked to the door, paused. "Mr. Trumbull, you might want to start preparing." "Preparing for what?" She looked back at him. "Everything that comes next." Outside the courthouse, the afternoon sun was already fading, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Nadine walked to her car, her heels clicking on the asphalt, her briefcase heavy in her hand. Her phone buzzed. A text from her lawyer. "Heard what happened. Call me." She would. Later. Right now, she needed to think. She had played her hand too early, revealed too much. The element of surprise, her most valuable weapon, was gone. But maybe that was okay. Maybe the surprise wasn't going to be what she thought it was. She got in her car, started the engine, pulled out of the parking lot, and noticed in her rearview mirror Deputy Nolan standing at the courthouse entrance, watching her go. That night, Nadine sat in her apartment with the wooden box open on the table. The ground lease. The deed. The chain of title going back 154 years. She pulled out another document. One she hadn't shown to Boyd Trumbull. A second ground lease. Dated 1895. Different parcel. The land under the county sheriff's office, also owned by the Ashford family. Also currently leased to the county. Also expiring in 2040. She set the document down, looked at the photograph of Isaiah on the wall. "What would you do?" she asked the silent image. No answer came. But as she sat there, watching the night deepen outside her window, a plan began to form. They had started this fight. She was going to finish it. The next morning, Nadine made 3 phone calls. The first was to her lawyer. She gave him a summary of what had happened and instructed him to file a formal complaint with the Florida Bar regarding Judge Crestwood's conduct. "That's a serious step," he said. "Bar complaints can take years to resolve, and they rarely result in meaningful discipline." "I know. File it anyway. I want a paper trail." The second call was to a journalist, a woman named Diane Kepler, who wrote for the state's largest newspaper and had a reputation for investigating government misconduct. "Ms. Ashford, this is an extraordinary story. A black family owning the land under a courthouse for over a century and being discriminated against by the very institution built on their property?" She paused. "But I need documentation, records, something I can verify." "I'll send you everything I have. Deeds, leases, payment records. The county has been paying my family over $4 million a year in ground rent. I have copies of the checks." "$4 million?" The journalist's voice sharpened. "This is real. You're not making this up. I'm a commercial real estate appraiser. I deal in facts and numbers. This is as real as it gets." The third call was the most important. Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division. "My name is Nadine Ashford. I'd like to file a complaint regarding systemic discrimination in the court system of Mercer County, Florida." A pause. Then, "What is the nature of the discrimination?" Nadine took a deep breath. "I have evidence of a pattern of civil rights violations affecting black citizens attempting to access the county court system. Profiling at security checkpoints. Selective enforcement of filing requirements. Biased judicial conduct. I have documentation, witness statements, and statistical analysis." "That's quite comprehensive. I've been preparing for this moment for longer than you know. Ma'am, a complaint like this would need to be reviewed by our section chief. It could take months to determine whether we have jurisdiction." "I understand, but I'd like the complaint on file, and I'd like it on the record that I reported this before anything else happens." "Before anything else happens?" Nadine looked at the documents spread across her table. The leases, the deeds, the records of over a century of ownership. Just a feeling. Things are about to get much more complicated. 2 weeks passed. The newspaper story ran on a Sunday, front page, above the fold. Courthouse built on black-owned land, the Ashford family's 132-year legacy. By Monday, the story had gone national. By Tuesday, protesters had gathered outside the Mercer County Courthouse, demanding an investigation into Nadine's treatment. By Wednesday, the county commission had called an emergency meeting. And by Thursday, Nadine Ashford received 2 letters. The first was from the Department of Justice. Her complaint had been received and was under preliminary review. The second was from the Mercer County Commission. She was invited to address the board at their next public meeting. She read both letters twice. Then she opened her laptop and began preparing her presentation. The fight was far from over. But for the first time in weeks, she felt like she might actually win. The county commission meeting was held in the Mercer County Government Center, a modern building 3 blocks from the courthouse. Glass walls, open atrium, the kind of architecture designed to suggest transparency and accessibility. The reality, as Nadine knew, was considerably less open. The meeting room was packed, every seat filled, with more people standing along the walls. Journalists, community members, activists, curious citizens. The story had captured something. Outrage, hope, the visceral satisfaction of watching powerful people squirm. Nadine sat in the front row, her briefcase on her lap, her documents organized and ready. The 5 county commissioners sat at a raised dais, their faces carefully neutral. Behind them, the county attorney and various staff members shuffled papers and whispered to each other. At exactly 7 p.m., the commission chair, a white man in his 60s named Harrison Webb, called the meeting to order. We have a full agenda tonight, so let's keep things moving. First item, public comments regarding recent events at the Mercer County Courthouse. He looked directly at Nadine. Ms. Ashford, you have 5 minutes. She stood, walked to the podium, placed her documents on the lectern. The room fell silent. Good evening. My name is Nadine Ashford. 3 weeks ago, I went to the Mercer County Courthouse to file a civil complaint. A boundary dispute, simple paperwork. She paused. I was stopped at security for a random check that wasn't random. I was turned away by a clerk who invented a lien that didn't exist. I was delayed for weeks by bureaucratic obstruction, and when I finally got my hearing, the judge dismissed my case without allowing me to present evidence, and then had me physically removed from the courtroom. She looked at the commissioners. None of that should have happened. Not to me, not to anyone. But there's something else you should know. She held up the first document. This is a ground lease agreement dated March 14, 1892. It was signed by my great-great-grandfather, Isaiah Ashford, and the Mercer County Board of Commissioners. Isaiah bought the land in 1871, 6 years after emancipation. He paid for it with money he earned through years of labor. And when the county needed a site for a new courthouse, he didn't sell. He leased. She set the document down, held up another. This is the current lease agreement, renewed in 2015. The Mercer County Courthouse sits on land owned by my family. The county pays us $4.2 million a year in ground rent. I am the managing trustee of the Ashford Family Trust. The room erupted. Commissioner Webb banged his gavel. Order! Order! Nadine waited for the noise to subside. I'm not telling you this to threaten anyone. The lease runs through 2040. The courthouse isn't going anywhere. I'm telling you this because of what it means. For 132 years, my family has been partners with this county. We built something together. We made sacrifices together. And yet when I walked into that courthouse 3 weeks ago, I was treated like a criminal, like an intruder, like someone who didn't belong. She pulled out another document. I have evidence of a pattern. 47 complaints of discrimination filed against the courthouse in the past 5 years. 42 of them from Black or Latino citizens. Not a single one resulted in disciplinary action. She placed the statistics on the lectern. I have body cam footage recovered from Deputy Nolan's camera showing him using discriminatory language during my detention. She placed a USB drive next to the statistics. And I have metadata from a threatening phone call I received 2 weeks ago, showing it originated from this building. She placed the phone records with the rest. I have already filed a complaint with the Department of Justice. They are reviewing whether to open a pattern or practice investigation. The county attorney leaned forward, whispering urgently to Commissioner Webb. Nadine continued. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for what every citizen deserves: equal access to justice, fair treatment under law, the right to be heard. She gathered her documents. The current ground lease contains a renewal clause. Both parties must agree to extend it. That negotiation will begin in 2035. She looked at each commissioner in turn. I want you to remember this moment. Remember how I was treated. Remember what I had to do to be heard. Because when that negotiation comes, I will remember too. She stepped back from the podium. Thank you for your time. She walked back to her seat, sat, placed her briefcase on her lap. The room was absolutely silent. The commission meeting lasted another 3 hours. Debates, motions, votes. The kind of procedural churning that would have been unbearable under normal circumstances. But tonight, nothing felt normal. By the end, the commission had voted to authorize an independent review of courthouse operations. 3 in favor, 2 against. The 2 dissenters had the strongest ties to the police union and the local business establishment. It wasn't everything. It wasn't even close to everything. But it was a start. Outside the government center, journalists swarmed Nadine, microphones extended, cameras flashing. Ms. Ashford, are you planning to sue the county? Miss Ashford, will you really refuse to renew the lease? Ms. Ashford, how does it feel to own the land under the courthouse? She stopped, turned to face them. I came to the courthouse to file a simple complaint. I was treated like a criminal for the color of my skin. That's what this is about, not the land, not the lease, not money. She paused. It's about the fact that, in America, in the 21st century, a black woman still has to prove she deserves to be treated like a human being. She walked to her car, got in, drove away. Behind her, the cameras kept rolling. That night, alone in her apartment, Nadine opened the wooden box one more time. The ground lease for the courthouse, the ground lease for the sheriff's office, the deeds, the surveys, the records of generations, and one more document, one she hadn't shown anyone, a letter dated 1892, written in Isaiah Ashford's own hand, to my children and their children and all who come after. I have built something here, not just land, not just property, a foundation, a future. Guard it well, use it wisely, and never, never let them make you feel like you don't belong. This is your land. This is your home. This is your birthright. Stand on it. Stand for it. And never give it up. Your father, Isaiah. Nadine read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully, placed it back in the box, and closed the lid. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You've been warned. Back off. She stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she typed her reply. I'm just getting started. She hit send. And for the first time in weeks, she smiled. The text message glowed on her screen in the darkness of her apartment. You've been warned. Back off. Nadine had sent her reply. I'm just getting started. And now she sat in the silence that followed, waiting for whatever came next. Her phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. You don't know what you're dealing with. She typed back. Then educate me. No response. She set the phone on the table, screen down, and turned her attention back to the wooden box. The documents inside represented everything her family had built over 5 generations. Land, legacy, a foundation that had survived Reconstruction, Jim Crow, redlining, and every other system designed to strip black families of their wealth. They had survived because they were careful, because they kept records, because they trusted paper more than promises. And now, those papers were going to bring down the people who thought they could treat her like she didn't matter. Her laptop sat open on the coffee table, the draft of her DOJ complaint filling the screen. 23 pages. 47 documented incidents. Statistical analysis showing that black citizens were 7 times more likely to be stopped at courthouse security, 4 times more likely to have filings delayed, and 12 times more likely to have cases dismissed without hearing. The numbers told a story that words alone couldn't convey, a story of systematic exclusion, of institutional contempt, of a justice system that had never been designed to serve people who looked like her. Nadine saved the document, closed the laptop, checked her watch. 11:47 p.m. Tomorrow, she would send the complaint. Tomorrow, she would set everything in motion. Tonight, she needed to rest. But sleep, when it finally came, was shallow and troubled. Dreams of courtrooms and gavels, of hands grabbing her arms, of her great-great-grandfather's face, watching from the photograph on the wall, waiting to see what she would do with everything he had built. The next 3 weeks moved with the grinding slowness of bureaucratic machinery. The DOJ acknowledged receipt of her complaint. A case number was assigned. A preliminary review was initiated. Letters were sent, forms were filed, and somewhere in Washington, D.C., a stack of papers with her name on them sat on someone's desk, waiting for attention. Meanwhile, in Mercer County, the fallout from the commission meeting continued to spread. The newspaper story had gone viral. National outlets picked it up. Cable news ran segments. Social media exploded with commentary, some supportive, some hateful, all of it loud. Nadine received 300 emails in the first week. Interview requests, speaking invitations, offers of legal assistance. She responded to none of them. She had said what she needed to say at the commission meeting. The rest would happen in courtrooms and hearing rooms, not on television. She also received 17 threats, anonymous letters, blocked phone calls, a dead rat left on her doorstep, its neck broken, a note tied to its tail. This could be you. She photographed everything, documented every incident, added each one to the file she was building. They wanted to scare her into silence. They didn't understand who they were dealing with. On a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after the commission meeting, Nadine drove to the Mercer County Archives. The building was old, a converted warehouse on the edge of downtown, its brick facade softened by decades of weather and neglect. Inside, rows of metal shelving stretched toward a ceiling lost in shadow, holding boxes of records that went back to the county's founding in 1845. Nadine had called ahead. The archivist was expecting her. Lenora Whitfield was 62 years old, white-haired, sharp-eyed, with the careful movements of someone who had spent a lifetime handling fragile things. She met Nadine at the front desk, her handshake firm, her expression curious. "Ms. Ashford, I've been reading about you." "Most people have lately." "I imagine so." Lenora gestured toward the interior of the building. "You said on the phone you wanted to see the original land records, the ones from the 1890s. I have copies of the ground lease, but I want to see the full file. Everything the county has on record about my family's property." Lenora nodded slowly. "Follow me." They walked through narrow aisles, past boxes labeled with dates and categories, deeper into the building where the oldest records were kept. The air grew cooler, drier, the climate controlled to preserve documents that had survived more than a century. Lenora stopped at a shelf near the back wall, pulled down a box marked Land Records, 1890, 1900. "This is what we have from that period: deeds, leases, surveys, correspondence." She set the box on a nearby table. "I should warn you, some of these documents are in poor condition. Handle them carefully." "I will." Lenora hesitated. "Ms. Ashford, I've worked in this archive for 35 years. I've seen a lot of records, a lot of history." She paused. "I've never seen anything quite like what your family built. It's remarkable. My great-great-grandfather believed in documentation. He said paper was the only thing white people respected. He was a wise man. Nadine opened the box. Inside, arranged in chronological order, were the records of her family's dealings with Mercer County. The original deed from 1871. The ground lease from 1892. Correspondence between Isaiah Ashford and the county commissioners. Negotiating terms, resolving disputes, building a relationship that would last generations. She pulled out a letter dated April 3, 1892, written in her great-great-grandfather's careful hand. To the Honorable Commissioners of Mercer County, I have received your proposal regarding the courthouse construction. After careful consideration, I am prepared to accept the terms outlined with the following modifications. The letter went on for 2 pages, detailing specific clauses Isaiah wanted added to the lease. Renewal provisions, maintenance responsibilities, a requirement that the county maintain proper and respectful treatment of all citizens regardless of color, in any building constructed on his land. Nadine read the last clause 3 times. He tried to protect us, she said quietly. Even then, he knew what they would do. Lenora leaned over her shoulder, reading. That clause. Is it still in the current lease? It was removed in the 1950s. My grandmother fought against it, but the county threatened not to renew unless she agreed to the modification. So they could discriminate freely. So they could do whatever they wanted. On our land. Nadine set the letter aside, continued through the box. More documents, more history. A survey from 1893 showing the exact boundaries of the courthouse parcel. A receipt for the first year's rent payment, $400, paid in gold coin. A photograph, faded and brittle, showing the courthouse under construction, black workers visible in the background, building a temple of justice on land their ancestors had been denied the right to own. And then, near the bottom of the box, something unexpected. Another ground lease. Different parcel. Different date. October 17, 1895. Nadine pulled it out carefully, read the description of the property. Her breath caught. Ms. Whitfield, what building is located at the corner of Oak Street and Government Way? Lenora frowned. That's the county sheriff's office, the main headquarters. And has been since when? Since 1896, I believe. The original building was completed that year. Nadine held up the document. This is a ground lease for that parcel, signed by Isaiah Ashford. 99 years, same terms as the courthouse lease. Lenora's face went pale. Are you saying... I'm saying my family owns the land under the sheriff's office, too. Nadine set the document on the table. I'm saying Isaiah Ashford didn't just lease them one piece of property. He leased them 2, and I'm betting no one in county government has any idea. The discovery changed everything. Not immediately. Bureaucracies don't move that fast, but in ways that would unfold over the months to come. A second ground lease meant a second point of leverage, a second revenue stream that someone in county government had been managing, or mismanaging, for over a century. Nadine spent the next 2 days at the archive with Lenora's help, pulling every relevant document. Chain of title records, payment histories, correspondence files. What they found was disturbing. The sheriff's office lease had been renewed in 1994, 3 years late, with a significant reduction in rent. The renewal documents were signed by the county manager at the time, a man named Harold Vance, without any evidence that the Ashford family had been consulted. How is that possible? Nadine asked, staring at the signature page. My grandmother was alive in 1994. She would never have agreed to a rent reduction. Lenora shook her head slowly. I don't know, but look at the witness signature. Nadine looked. The name was partially illegible, but the title underneath was clear. County Attorney. They forged it, she said, or they found someone in my family willing to sign without understanding what they were signing. Either way, this renewal might not be valid. If it's not valid, what happens to the lease? Nadine thought about it. If the 1994 renewal was fraudulent, Then the original lease expired in 1994, which means the county has been occupying my family's land without authorization for 30 years. That would be worth millions. Tens of millions, maybe more. Lenora sat back in her chair. Ms. Ashford, this is beyond my expertise. You need lawyers, forensic accountants, people who can trace what happened. I know. Nadine gathered the documents, placing them carefully in her briefcase. But first, I need to understand who was involved, who benefited, who covered it up. She looked at Lenora. Will you help me? The archivist hesitated. Her job was to preserve records, not to investigate crimes. Getting involved could cost her everything. But there was something in her eyes, the look of someone who had seen too much injustice, stayed silent too many times, and finally found a cause worth the risk. What do you need? Over the next month, Nadine and Lenora became an unlikely team. Lenora knew the archive better than anyone. She knew where the gaps were, where documents had been misfiled or deliberately hidden, where the trail of paper led and where it disappeared. Nadine knew how to read the numbers, how to trace financial flows, how to identify the patterns that revealed who was getting paid and who was doing the paying. Together, they built a picture of what had happened. In 1994, Harold Vance had negotiated the sheriff's office lease renewal without the Ashford family's knowledge. The rent had been reduced by 60%, from $800,000 annually to $320,000. The difference, over 30 years, was more than $14 million. Where had that money gone? The records suggested an answer. In 1994, Harold Vance had authorized the creation of a Public Safety Enhancement Fund, a discretionary account used to supplement the sheriff's department budget. The fund had received regular deposits, roughly matching the amount saved on the lease reduction. The sheriff at the time was a man named Thomas Crestwood, Judge Harlan Crestwood's father. It's a family operation, Nadine said, staring at the financial records spread across her dining table. The Crestwoods have been benefiting from my family's property for 30 years, and when I walked into that courtroom, Harlan Crestwood knew exactly who I was. He knew my name, he knew what my family owned, and he tried to destroy me before I could find out what they had done. Lenora nodded grimly. But there's more. Look at this. She handed Nadine another document, a memo from 2015, when the courthouse lease had been renewed. Ashford Ground lease renewal. The family representative has agreed to terms. Recommend approval without modification. Note, representative appeared unaware of secondary property holdings. Advise maintaining current arrangement. The signature at the bottom, Boyd Trumbull. Trumbull knew, Nadine said. He knew about the sheriff's office lease. He knew it was irregular. And he deliberately kept my mother in the dark when she renewed the courthouse lease. Your mother signed the 2015 renewal? She was sick, early-stage dementia, though we didn't know it at the time. She signed whatever they put in front of her. Nadine's voice hardened. They took advantage of a dying woman to protect their scheme. Can you prove that? I can prove she had diminished capacity. I can prove Trumbull knew about the irregularities. I can prove the Crestwood family benefited financially. She gathered the documents. What I can't prove, yet, is criminal intent. That's what the DOJ investigation is for. The confrontation came 3 days later. Nadine was leaving her office, walking to her car in the parking garage, when she heard footsteps behind her. Fast, deliberate, closing the distance. She turned. Deputy Garrett Nolan stood 10 feet away, out of uniform, wearing jeans and a dark jacket. His face was twisted with fury. You think you're so smart, he said, digging through records, talking to reporters, making us all look bad. Nadine kept her voice steady. I think I'm someone who was mistreated by people who thought they could get away with it. I was wrong about that last part. You were wrong about a lot of things. He stepped closer. You should have taken the hint. Gone away. Let things settle down. And let you keep abusing your authority? Keep harassing people who look like me? People like you. He spat the words. You don't belong here. You never did. Your family bought some land 100 years ago, and you think that makes you special? You're nothing. You're just another what? He didn't finish the sentence, but the word hung in the air between them, ugly and unmistakable. Deputy Nolan, you're off duty. You've followed me to a private location, and you're making threatening statements. I'm recording this conversation. She held up her phone. His face went white, then red. You're bluffing. Florida is a one-party consent state. I don't need your permission to record, and everything you just said is now evidence. He lunged. His hand caught her wrist, twisted, sent the phone clattering across the concrete floor. His other hand grabbed her shoulder, shoving her back against her car. Give me that phone. Let go of me. I said give me the... Nadine drove her knee upward, hard, into his thigh. Not the groin. He was turned slightly, protecting it, but the nerve cluster on the inside of his leg. His grip loosened. She twisted free, ducked under his arm, and came up with her keys in her fist, the pointed end jutting between her fingers. Stay back. Nolan staggered, his leg buckling. He caught himself against a concrete pillar, his breath ragged. You're going to regret that. I regret a lot of things. This isn't one of them. She backed toward her phone, keeping her eyes on him, and scooped it up. The screen was cracked, but still recording. This conversation, your assault, all of it documented. She opened her car door. Go home, deputy, sober up, and pray that when the DOJ comes calling, you have a better story than the one you just gave me. She got in the car, locked the doors, started the engine. Through the window, she could see Nolan still leaning against the pillar, watching her with pure hatred in his eyes. She drove away without looking back. The assault accelerated everything. Nadine filed a police report the next morning. The irony wasn't lost on her, reporting an attack by a deputy to the department that employed him, but she needed the paper trail, needed the official record. The responding officer took her statement with barely concealed skepticism, wrote down her account, promised to look into it. Nothing happened for 2 weeks. Then, on a Friday afternoon, she received a call from a number she didn't recognize. Ms. Ashford, this is Special Agent Diana Reeves, FBI. I'm calling regarding your complaint to the Department of Justice. Nadine set down the contract she had been reviewing. I'm listening. The Civil Rights Division has completed its preliminary review. Based on the evidence you submitted, we're opening a formal pattern or practice investigation into the Mercer County court system. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. What does that mean exactly? It means federal investigators will be examining courthouse operations, interviewing staff and citizens, reviewing records. If we find systematic civil rights violations, the department can seek a consent decree requiring institutional reform. And the individuals involved? The judge, the deputies, the administrators? Pattern or practice investigations focus on institutional problems, not individual misconduct. However, if our investigation uncovers evidence of criminal behavior, that can be referred to the U.S. Attorney for prosecution. Criminal prosecution. The words were beautiful. Agent Reeves, I have additional evidence, documents I've discovered since filing my complaint. They suggest financial irregularities involving county officials and my family's property. A pause on the line. What kind of irregularities? A ground lease that may have been fraudulently renewed. Millions of dollars diverted over 30 years. A connection to the judge who dismissed my case. Another pause, longer this time. Ms. Ashford, I think we need to meet in person. If you're still here, you're going to want to see how this ends. Subscribe now. Part of this story will stay with you long after it's over. The meeting took place at a federal building in Jacksonville, 90 miles from Mercer County. Nadine drove up on a Monday morning, her briefcase packed with documents, her mind racing through everything she needed to say. Agent Reeves was younger than she'd expected. Mid-30s, black, with close-cropped hair and the sharp-eyed focus of someone who had spent years finding lies hidden in paperwork. "Walk me through it," Reeves said, once they were settled in a conference room. From the beginning. Nadine started with Isaiah Ashford, the land purchase in 1871, the ground leases in 1892 and 1895. The generations of her family who had maintained the relationship with the county, trusting that the agreements would be honored. Then she moved to 1994. The fraudulent renewal, the creation of the Public Safety Enhancement Fund, the connection to Thomas Crestwood. Sheriff Crestwood died in 2008, Reeves said, making notes. His son Harlan was appointed to the bench in 2011. After spending 15 years as a county prosecutor, he would have known about the fund, known where the money came from. That's speculation. It's a pattern. Look at who benefited. Thomas Crestwood's department got millions in extra funding. His son rose through the ranks to become a judge, and when a member of the Ashford family finally showed up asking questions, that judge threw her out of his courtroom without a hearing. Reeves was quiet for a moment. The problem is chain of custody. These documents you found in the archive, can you prove they haven't been altered? Can you establish when they were filed, who had access, whether they're authentic? Lenora Whitfield can testify to their provenance. She's the county archivist. She's been there 35 years. And she's willing to cooperate with a federal investigation? Nadine thought about Lenora's face in the archive, the quiet determination, the sense of someone who had finally found something worth fighting for. Yes, she is. Reeves nodded slowly. I need to be honest with you, Ms. Ashford. Cases like this take years to build. We're talking about investigating a sitting judge, current county officials, financial records going back decades. Even if we find what you think we'll find, bringing charges is a separate process with its own timeline. I understand. And there's the political dimension. Mercer County has friends in Tallahassee, people who won't appreciate federal investigators poking around in local government. I understand that too. So why are you doing this? You could walk away, take your evidence to a civil attorney, sue for damages, probably settle for a substantial amount. Why push for a criminal investigation that might take years and might not result in anything? Nadine looked at the documents spread across the table. Her family's history, her great-great-grandfather's signature, faded but still legible after 130 years. Because my family didn't build this just to get paid. They built it to mean something. To prove that black people could own land, could make agreements, could be treated as equals under the law. She paused. And for 30 years these people have been cheating us, lying to us, using what we built to fund their careers and protect their power. If I walk away now, I'm saying that's okay, that we can be bought off, that justice is just another commodity. She met Reeves's eyes. I'm not for sale, and neither is my family's legacy. The federal investigation began 3 weeks later. It started quietly. Agents requesting records, interviews conducted behind closed doors, the machinery of federal law enforcement grinding slowly but inexorably forward. In Mercer County, the mood shifted. Officials who had been dismissive became nervous. Lawyers who had been aggressive became cautious. The courthouse, which had operated for decades as a fiefdom of local power, suddenly felt the presence of a larger authority. Judge Harlan Crestwood continued to preside over cases, but his behavior changed. He was more careful now, more procedural, aware that every ruling might be scrutinized. The casual cruelty Nadine had witnessed, the interrupted arguments, the dismissed cases, the sneering contempt, became less visible, pushed underground by the knowledge that someone was watching. It wasn't justice, not yet, but it was a start. Meanwhile, Nadine's boundary dispute finally moved forward. With Crestwood compromised and federal investigators asking questions, the county reassigned her case to a different judge, an older woman named Patricia Hewitt, who had a reputation for fairness and a clear disdain for the political machinations of her colleagues. The hearing lasted 45 minutes. Nadine presented her evidence. Her neighbor's attorney, a different lawyer this time, Malcolm Sheridan had quietly withdrawn from the case, made a half-hearted argument about adverse possession. Judge Hewitt listened, asked a few pointed questions, and issued her ruling. The evidence clearly shows the fence encroaches on the plaintiff's property. Defendant is ordered to remove the encroaching structure within 60 days. Court costs to be paid by the defendant. Case dismissed. 60 days. A clear victory. The first one Nadine had won in this courthouse. She thanked Judge Hewitt and walked out into the afternoon sunlight, the boundary dispute that had started everything finally resolved. It felt like closing a chapter, but the book was far from finished. Chapter 6 months after the federal investigation began, the first results emerged. A grand jury in Jacksonville returned indictments against 3 individuals: Deputy Garrett Nolan, charged with deprivation of civil rights under 18 U.S.C. 242, Clerk Priscilla Davenport, charged with obstruction of justice, and Administrator Boyd Trumbull, charged with conspiracy and falsifying government records. The charges were serious but limited. Nolan faced up to 10 years if convicted. Davenport and Trumbull faced 5 years each. None of them were charged with the financial crimes Nadine had uncovered. Those investigations were ongoing, the prosecutors said, too complex to rush. Judge Harlan Crestwood was not indicted. The news hit Nadine like a physical blow. She had spent months building the case against him, documenting his bias, tracing his family's connection to the fraudulent lease renewal. And now he was walking free, protected by the same institutional barriers that had shielded him his entire career. "It's not over," Agent Reeves told her when they spoke by phone. "The financial investigation is separate. We're still tracing the money, still building the case. But judicial immunity is a significant obstacle. Judges are protected from prosecution for actions taken in their official capacity. He threw me out of his courtroom without cause. He violated my due process rights. And if you want to sue him civilly, you might be able to overcome his immunity. But criminal prosecution? That requires proving he acted outside the scope of his duties. It's a high bar." "So he gets away with it?" "Not necessarily. The Judicial Qualifications Commission is conducting its own investigation. If they find he violated the Code of Judicial Conduct, they can recommend removal from the bench." "Recommend, not require." "It's the process, Miss Ashford. I know it's frustrating, but the process is all we have." Nadine hung up the phone and sat in her apartment, staring at the wall where Isaiah's photograph hung. The process. The same process that had been used against her family for 130 years. The same process that had allowed Harold Vance to forge a lease renewal, that had allowed Thomas Crestwood to fund his department with stolen money, that had allowed Harlan Crestwood to rise to the bench on a foundation of corruption. The process was broken, had always been broken, was designed to be broken, but it was also the only weapon she had. She picked up her phone, dialed her lawyer. "I want to file a civil suit against Judge Crestwood. Personal capacity. Violation of civil rights under Section 1983. Nadine, he'll claim judicial immunity. Let him claim whatever he wants. I want him in a courtroom answering questions under oath. I want the whole county to see what he is." A pause. "It's going to be expensive, time-consuming, and there's no guarantee you'll win." "I know." She looked at the photograph on the wall. "But some things are worth fighting for even when you might lose. My great-great-grandfather taught me that." The civil trial was scheduled for the following spring. In the meantime, the federal cases moved forward. Priscilla Davenport pleaded guilty to a reduced charge, accepting 18 months probation in exchange for testimony against Trumbull. Boyd Trumbull went to trial, was convicted on 2 of 4 counts, and was sentenced to 14 months in federal prison. Deputy Nolan's case was more complicated. His lawyer argued that his actions fell within the scope of his official duties, that the use of force was justified, that the discriminatory language captured on Nadine's recording was taken out of context. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, they found Nolan guilty of 1 count of deprivation of civil rights, not guilty on a 2nd count related to the parking garage assault. He was sentenced to 2 years. He would likely serve 8 months. It wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. But it was something. And then came the Judicial Qualifications Commission hearing. The proceeding was closed to the public, but Nadine was permitted to testify as a complainant. She sat in a wood-paneled conference room, facing a panel of retired judges and legal experts, and told her story one more time. The hearing in room 4B, the dismissal without cause, the order to remove her from the courtroom. The words Crestwood had spoken. You seem like the type, and what they revealed about his mindset. She also presented the evidence she had gathered, the financial connections between the Crestwood family and the fraudulent lease renewal. The memo from Boyd Trumbull showing that county officials had deliberately kept her family in the dark. The pattern of biased rulings that had characterized Crestwood's time on the bench. When she finished, the panel chair, a stern-faced woman in her 70s, looked at her with an expression that might have been sympathy or might have been exhaustion. Ms. Ashford, thank you for your testimony. This commission takes allegations of judicial misconduct very seriously. We will review all evidence and issue our findings in due course. How long? These matters require careful consideration. Several months, at minimum. Several months. More waiting, more uncertainty, more time for the system to protect its own. Nadine left the hearing room and walked out into the afternoon sun. She was tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of waiting. Tired of a justice system that moved like molasses when black people were the victims and lightning when they were the accused. But she wasn't done. Not yet. There was still the ground lease to deal with. The negotiation began in the summer. The current lease on the courthouse property, the one her mother had signed in 2015, still had 15 years to run, but the lease contained a provision allowing either party to initiate renegotiation if material circumstances changed. Federal investigation, criminal convictions, pending judicial misconduct findings. Material circumstances had definitely changed. Nadine hired a team of lawyers, real estate specialists, civil rights attorneys, a former federal prosecutor who understood how to apply pressure without crossing legal lines. They sent a letter to the county commission. The Ashford Family Trust was invoking its renegotiation rights. The county's response was swift and panicked. Suddenly, officials who had refused to meet with her were requesting appointments. Suddenly, the same people who had tried to obstruct her filing were offering settlements, buyouts, anything to make the problem go away. She refused them all. I don't want money, she told her legal team. I want reform, institutional change, guarantees that what happened to me won't happen to anyone else. That's not typically how lease negotiations work. Then we'll make it work differently. The negotiations stretched over months. The county offered increased rent. Nadine demanded a civilian oversight board for courthouse operations. The county proposed a 10-year lease extension. Nadine insisted on mandatory anti-discrimination training for all court staff. Back and forth, point by point, building something new from the ruins of what had been broken. By the time they reached an agreement, the document was 47 pages long. It included rent increases, substantial ones, reflecting the true market value of the property for the first time in decades. But it also included provisions that had never been part of any government lease Nadine had ever seen. An independent ombudsman to receive and investigate complaints of discrimination. Quarterly reporting on case outcomes, broken down by race and ethnicity. A requirement that the county provide free legal assistance to any citizen who couldn't afford representation in civil matters. And, buried in the appendices, a clause that would have made Isaiah Ashford smile. If the county violated any anti-discrimination provision, the lease could be terminated immediately, with no compensation for the value of the building. They'll never agree to that, her lead attorney said when she proposed it. Then we won't agree to the lease. They agreed. Don't go anywhere. The ending of this story is something you need to hear. Make sure you're subscribed. The signing ceremony took place on a Thursday afternoon in October, exactly 1 year after Nadine had been thrown out of Judge Crestwood's courtroom. The county commission chamber was packed. Journalists, activists, community members who had followed the story from the beginning. The same room where she had revealed her family's ownership, where she had laid out the evidence of discrimination, where she had promised to remember how she was treated. Now she sat at the signing table, pen in hand, the new lease agreement spread before her. Across from her sat the county commissioners, their faces carefully neutral. They had fought this, resisted every provision, made her earn every word of the final document. But they had lost. Commissioner Harrison Webb cleared his throat. "Before we sign, I want to say something. On behalf of Mercer County, I apologize to Ms. Ashford and her family. The treatment she received was unacceptable. It reflected institutional failures that we are committed to addressing." The words were scripted, lawyered, the minimum required by the settlement agreement. But they were also on the record. And records, as Nadine had learned, were everything. She picked up the pen, signed her name. The commissioners signed theirs. Cameras flashed. Applause erupted. People crowded around, congratulating her, shaking her hand, telling her what her victory meant to them. She smiled, accepted their praise, said the right things, but inside, she felt the weight of everything that still remained undone. The Judicial Qualifications Commission issued its findings 2 months later. Judge Harlan Crestwood was found to have violated the Code of Judicial Conduct on 3 counts: failure to maintain impartiality, failure to ensure the right to be heard, and conduct prejudicial to the administration of justice. The recommended sanction: public censure and mandatory retirement, not removal, not disbarment. Retirement, with full pension, full benefits, the comfortable exit of a man who had spent his career abusing his position. Nadine read the findings in her apartment, the winter sun slanting through the windows, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the air. Mandatory retirement. He would leave the bench, but he would not be punished, would not face consequences proportional to the harm he had caused, would spend his remaining years in comfort, protected by the same system he had corrupted. It was not justice, but it was, perhaps, as close as the system could come. She set the document aside, walked to the window, looked out at the city she had spent a year fighting. The boundary dispute was resolved. The lease was renegotiated. 3 people were going to prison. A federal monitor had been appointed to oversee courthouse reforms for the next 5 years. Progress, real progress, more than most people ever achieved. And still it felt incomplete. She turned back to her apartment, to the wooden box on the coffee table, to the photograph of Isaiah Ashford on the wall. "I did what I could," she said to the silent image. "I hope it was enough." The photograph didn't answer, but she could almost see a smile in her great-great-grandfather's eyes. 3 weeks later, Nadine received a package in the mail. No return address, no postmark. Just a manila envelope, hand-delivered, sitting on her doorstep when she came home from work. Inside, a single sheet of paper and a USB drive. The paper was a photocopy of an email, heavily redacted. Most of the text was blacked out, but a few phrases remained visible. Ashford Properties, consolidate before discovery. Crestwood liability, recommend immediate action. The date on the email, March 2015, 3 months before her mother had signed the lease renewal. Nadine stared at the redacted text. Someone had sent this to her. Someone who wanted her to know that the conspiracy went deeper than she had uncovered, that there were still secrets buried in the county's files, still people who had escaped accountability. She plugged in the USB drive. It contained a single file, an audio recording. She pressed play. The voice was male, older, authoritative. She didn't recognize it. "The Ashford woman is asking questions. The archivist has been helping her. We need to contain this before she finds the other properties." Another voice, younger. "What other properties?" "The leases from the 1890s. Ashford didn't just own 2 parcels, he owned 4. The courthouse, the sheriff's office, the original county hospital site, and the plot where the water treatment plant sits now. 4 properties? That's millions. Tens of millions if she figures it out. The hospital lease lapsed in 1962. We've been occupying that land illegally for 60 years. The water treatment plant is the same. So what do? The same thing we've always done. Bury it. The archivist is retiring next month. Once she's gone, no one else knows where those records are. And if Ashford keeps digging? A pause on the recording. When the older voice spoke again, it was cold. Then we make sure she stops. The recording ended. Nadine sat in the silence of her apartment, her heart pounding. 4 properties, not 2. 4. Her family owned land under 4 county buildings, and someone, people in power, people still in their positions, had known about it, had been covering it up, had been preparing to silence anyone who got too close. The archivist is retiring next month. Lenora. Nadine grabbed her phone, dialed Lenora's number. It rang, and rang, and rang. No answer. She tried again. Same result. She pulled up her contacts, found Lenora's home address, grabbed her keys and ran for the door. 20 minutes later, she pulled up in front of a modest house on a quiet street. The lights were off. The driveway was empty. She knocked on the door. No response. She tried the neighbors. An elderly woman answered. Lenora? Oh, she moved out last month. Didn't say where she was going. Just packed up one day and left. Did she leave a forwarding address? A phone number? Anything? The woman shook her head. She seemed scared, honestly. Kept looking over her shoulder. Told me not to tell anyone she was leaving. She paused. Are you a friend of hers? Yes, I am. Nadine walked back to her car, sat in the driver's seat, stared at the empty house. Lenora was gone. Disappeared. Either hiding from the people on that recording or silenced by them. And somewhere in the county archives, there were documents that could prove her family owned land under 4 government buildings. Documents that someone had spent 60 years hiding. She looked at her phone. At the audio file she had transferred from the USB drive. New evidence. New crimes. New battles to fight. She thought about everything she had already been through. The hearings, the trials, the endless negotiations, the threats, the assault, the constant weight of fighting a system designed to crush her. She thought about walking away, taking her victories, such as they were, and going back to her life, letting someone else pick up the fight. For a long moment, she considered it. Then she thought about Isaiah Ashford, about her grandmother, about her mother, about every generation of her family who had held on to what was theirs, who had refused to give up even when giving up would have been easier. She started the car. There was a federal building in Jacksonville with her name on a visitor's log. There was an FBI agent who had promised to follow the evidence wherever it led. There were 4 properties, and there were people who thought they could steal what her family had built. They were wrong. The drive to Jacksonville took 90 minutes. Nadine spent the time thinking, planning, organizing the new information into a coherent narrative. When she arrived at the federal building, she asked for Agent Reeves. She's been transferred, the receptionist said. 6 weeks ago. New assignment. Transferred where? I can't disclose that information. Another door closed. Another ally removed from the board. But there were other agents. Other paths. The DOJ complaint was still active. The consent decree was still in force. The machinery of federal oversight was still grinding forward, however slowly. Nadine asked to speak with whoever had taken over Reeves's caseload. She waited 2 hours. Finally, a young man in a dark suit emerged and led her to a conference room. Ms. Ashford, I'm Agent Marcus Webb. I've been briefed on your case. She handed him the USB drive. There's more. A lot more. He listened to the recording, read the redacted email, took notes in a careful, precise hand. When she finished explaining what she had discovered, he sat back in his chair. This is significant, If these other properties exist, if the county has been illegally occupying them for decades, it changes everything. It could. He paused. But I have to be honest with you. Agent Reeves was removed from this case because of political pressure. People in Tallahassee are not happy about federal interference in Mercer County. Every new allegation, every expansion of the investigation faces resistance. So you're telling me to give up? I'm telling you to be realistic. You've already accomplished more than anyone expected. You've gotten convictions, reforms, a consent decree. Most people would consider that a victory. Most people aren't sitting on evidence of 60 years of fraud. Agent Webb was quiet for a moment. What do you want, Ms. Ashford? Truly. What outcome would satisfy you? Nadine thought about the question. Really thought about it. I want my family's property back. All of it. I want the people who stole it to face consequences. And I want the system that allowed it to happen to change, so it never happens to anyone else. Those are three different things. Property recovery is a civil matter. Criminal consequences require evidence that meets a very high standard. Systemic change takes decades if it happens at all. Then it takes decades. I'm not going anywhere. Agent Webb looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. I'll see what I can do. The investigation continued. Over the following months, federal agents traced the records Nadine had found. They identified 2 additional ground leases, the county hospital site and the water treatment plant, both of which had lapsed without renewal, both of which the county had continued to occupy without authorization. The total value of the illegally occupied land, $47 million. The county's response was predictable. Denial, then deflection, then an attempt to claim adverse possession, arguing that 60 years of occupation gave them legal title regardless of the original lease terms. The case went to federal court. Nadine testified for 3 days, walking the judge through the documents, the history, the generations of her family who had trusted the county to honor its agreements. The ruling came 6 months later. The county's adverse possession claim was rejected. The ground leases were valid. The Ashford Family Trust was entitled to back rent, plus interest, plus damages for the county's willful trespass. Total judgment, $63 million. The county immediately filed an appeal. The case would take years to resolve. More motions, more hearings, more delays. But the principle was established. The land was hers, had always been hers, and no amount of legal maneuvering could change that fundamental fact. On the anniversary of the federal court ruling, Nadine stood in front of the Mercer County Courthouse. The building looked the same as it always had. White columns, bronze doors, the architecture of authority and intimidation. But something had changed. Something invisible, but profound. The people who worked inside knew now, who owned the ground beneath their feet, knew that every step they took, every case they heard, every judgment they rendered, happened on Ashford land. She walked up the steps, through the security checkpoint, where the deputies nodded respectfully and let her pass without incident. Through the lobby, where a portrait of Isaiah Ashford now hung beside the other historical figures of the county. The portrait had been part of the consent decree. A small thing, maybe, a gesture. But gestures mattered. They told people what was valued, what was remembered, who belonged. She stopped in front of the portrait, looked at her great-great-grandfather's face, rendered in oil paint, his expression stern but proud. "We did it," she said quietly. "Not everything, but enough." The portrait, of course, didn't answer, but she could have sworn she saw approval in those painted eyes. That evening, Nadine returned to her apartment. The wooden box sat on the coffee table, as it always did. The documents inside, the deeds, the leases, the letters, were copies now, the originals donated to a museum that specialized in Black history. But one document remained, the letter Isaiah had written to his descendants, the one she had read so many times the words were burned into her memory. Guard it well, use it wisely, and never, never let them make you feel like you don't belong. She had done her best, had guarded what he built, had used it to force change, to demand accountability, to prove that black families could stand against systems designed to destroy them. It wasn't perfect, would never be perfect. Judge Crestwood was retired, but not imprisoned. Lenora Whitfield was still missing. The county was still appealing the judgment. And somewhere, hidden in archives and databases and the memories of people who would never talk, there were more secrets, more lies, more stolen wealth waiting to be reclaimed. But she had time. The Ashford family had survived for 5 generations. They would survive for 5 more. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She tensed, remembering the threats, the warnings, the dead rat on her doorstep. But this message was different. Ms. Ashford, I'm safe. I had to disappear. They were getting too close. But I'm still watching, still documenting. When you're ready for the next fight, call this number. L.W. Lenora. Alive. Hidden. Still in the fight. Nadine smiled. She typed back, I'm always ready. Then she closed the wooden box, turned off the lights, walked to the window and looked out at the city lights spreading across the darkness. One fight was over. Another was beginning, and she would be there for all of it. Epilogue. 1 year later. The dedication ceremony was held on a Saturday morning in spring. The Ashford Community Center stood where the old county hospital had been, a building that had served white patients in the front and black patients in the basement, that had been built on stolen land and operated on stolen labor, that had finally been torn down when the truth came out. In its place, a modern structure of glass and brick, housing a legal aid clinic, a community meeting space, a library, and a museum dedicated to the history of black land ownership in Florida. Nadine cut the ribbon with gold scissors, surrounded by community members, journalists, and the descendants of families who had lost their land to the same tactics that had been used against the Ashfords. This building stands on Ashford land, she said, speaking into a microphone. Land that my great-great-grandfather bought 154 years ago. Land that was stolen, hidden, denied, and now reclaimed. She looked at the crowd. But this isn't just about my family. It's about every black family that was cheated out of what they built, every deed that was forged, every lease that was ignored, every inheritance that was stolen. She gestured at the building behind her. This center will help those families fight back. We'll give them the legal resources, the historical records, the community support they need to reclaim what was taken, because that's what my great-great-grandfather would have wanted. Not just to hold on to what was his, but to help others hold on to what was theirs. The crowd applauded. Nadine stepped back from the microphone. Let others speak. Let the moment belong to everyone who had fought, everyone who had sacrificed, everyone who had believed that justice was possible, even when the evidence suggested otherwise. As the ceremony wound down, a woman approached her, white, elderly, wearing a simple dress and a nervous expression. Ms. Ashford, I don't know if you remember me. Nadine looked at her. The face was familiar, but she couldn't place it. I'm Eleanor Vance. Harold Vance was my husband. The name hit like a physical blow. Harold Vance. The county manager who had forged the 1994 lease renewal, who had started the chain of fraud that had lasted 60 years. He passed away in 2019, Eleanor continued. But before he died, he gave me something. Told me to keep it safe, to give it to the right person when the time came. She held out an envelope. I think you're the right person. Nadine took the envelope, opened it. Inside, a handwritten confession. Names, dates, amounts. Every person who had been involved in the scheme to steal the Ashford properties. Every payment that had been made. Every secret that had been kept, including names she recognized, names of people still in power, still in positions of authority, still benefiting from her family's stolen wealth. She looked up at Eleanor Vance. Why now? Why give this to me? Eleanor's eyes were wet. Because I was married to that man for 43 years. I knew what he was doing. I knew it was wrong. And I never said anything. She paused. I want to make it right, as much as I can. Nadine folded the confession, placed it in her pocket. Thank you. Eleanor nodded, turned, walked away into the crowd. Nadine watched her go. Then she pulled out her phone, dialed a number. Agent Webb, it's Nadine Ashford. I have something you need to see. The investigation continues. The Ashford Community Center serves over 2,000 families a year. The federal consent decree remains in effect, with another 3 years of monitoring. And somewhere in Mercer County, in file cabinets and databases, and the memories of people who thought they had gotten away with it, more secrets wait to be uncovered. Nadine Ashford will find them, all of them, because that's what Ashfords do. They hold on to what's theirs, they fight for what's right, and they never, ever give up. Nadine Ashford's story is not just about a black woman reclaiming what belonged to her family. It is a story about every single one of us. Those who have been dismissed, ignored, treated as though we do not deserve to occupy the spaces where our own fates are decided. Isaiah Ashford bought that land in 1871 for $412. That small sum represented 6 years of backbreaking labor from a man who had just escaped the chains of slavery. He did not buy land to become wealthy. He bought land to exist, to prove that a black man could own something, could stand on his own ground and say, "This is mine." 132 years later, his great-great-granddaughter walked into a courthouse built on that very land and was thrown out like a trespasser. They did not know who she was. They did not need to know. They saw the color of her skin and decided she did not belong. That is the first lesson. Prejudice does not need a reason. It exists in the way people look at you before you open your mouth, in the way they search your bag more thoroughly than others, in the way they ask if you are sure you understand, sure you belong here, sure you have the right to stand where you are standing. But this story also teaches us a second lesson. Documentation is a weapon. Isaiah Ashford understood that in 1871. He recorded everything, saved every receipt, signed every contract, because he knew that in a world where a black man's word meant nothing, only paper could protect him. Nadine inherited that lesson. She documented times, documented names, documented every violation. She recorded conversations, photographed evidence, built a case file as though every scrap of paper was a brick in a wall protecting her. And when the moment came, that wall held. The third lesson, justice is never complete. Judge Crestwood was forced into retirement but never went to prison. Priscilla Davenport received probation. Deputy Nolan served only 8 months. The system protects itself before it protects victims. But that does not mean the fight was meaningless. Nadine did not change the entire system overnight. No one can. But she changed a part of it. A small part, but a real one. An independent oversight committee, anti-discrimination training programs, a community center helping other families reclaim their stolen land. Small changes accumulate into large changes. Today's precedents become tomorrow's standards. That is how systems actually change, not through a single revolution, but through thousands of small battles fought by thousands of ordinary people. The fourth lesson, and perhaps the most important, you should not have to be someone special to be treated with dignity. Nadine said it to reporters after the county commission meeting. She should not have had to reveal that her family owned the land beneath the courthouse to be heard. She should not have had to be someone important to be respected. Every person who walks into a courthouse, a hospital, a school, a government office deserves to be treated like a human being. No conditions, no proof required, no permission needed. If you are watching this video, I want you to do 3 things. First, document everything. Whenever you are treated unfairly, write it down. Dates, times, names of people involved, what they said, what they did. You might think you will remember, but memories fade. Paper does not. Second, know your rights. Nadine won because she knew the law. She cited statutes. She understood procedures. Knowledge is power, not a slogan, but a fact. Take time to learn your rights in situations you might encounter. Third, do not stay silent. Nadine could have walked away after being thrown out of that courtroom. She could have accepted a settlement and lived comfortably, but she understood that her silence would become permission for them to do the same thing to someone else. Speaking up does not mean you have to fight the entire system alone. It means you acknowledge what happened, report it when possible, share your story, so that others know they are not alone. Isaiah Ashford bought that land 154 years ago because he believed the future could be better than the present. Nadine kept fighting because she believed the same thing. And you? What do you believe? Your silence is their permission. Your voice is their accountability. Your documentation is your weapon. Your knowledge is your armor. The system was not built for people like Nadine. It was not built for people like you or me. But systems can be rebuilt. Brick by brick, case by case, generation by generation. Isaiah Ashford laid the first brick in 1871. Nadine laid another in that courtroom. The question now is simple. Will you lay yours?